Zaccharie for three and the win. Yeah! He got it!
We are here to Fuel Rockets News. This Rockets Field podcast presented by the Believe Network. I am your co-host, Lashard Binkley. You can always find me on Twitter at Binkley Hoops. And you can find my written work over at SB Nation and the Dream Shake. And of course, before we get into today's topic, I want to give my co-host a chance to introduce himself.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Vader. You can find me on Twitter, X app at Vader Sports, and you can also find me on IG for your Rockets-related and Texans-related content.
And Vader, of course, we are a few days away from the Rockets draft that's coming up on Wednesday. As of right now, the Rockets have the number 3 pick. We don't necessarily know if they're going to keep that pick. And that's kind of the topic of today's show. We heard from Kelly Iko the last couple of days. In his article, he has stated that there are some teams that are interested in that number 3 pick. So that kind of opens the door for the Rockets to have other opportunities besides keeping that number 3 pick, or even maybe trading it to another team. So that's kind of where I want to start today. We're also going to kind of get into a little bit about the actual roster that we have right now and what that roster should be going forward. But of course, the main topic right now is the draft and whether the Rockets should keep that pick or maybe even trade back and maybe add an additional player and get additional draft picks. And again, I want to kind of talk about a little bit about that Kelly Iko article. And in the article, he stated that there are several teams that want to move up to that number 3 spot. That they're getting really interested in players like Reed Sheppard and Donovan Clingan, 2 guys that also been tied to the Houston Rockets. And 3 of those teams were Charlotte, Memphis, and Portland that were aggressively trying to move up and get to that number 3 pick. Like I said, I want to start there and get your opinion. If you're Rafael Stone and you see all these teams interested in the pick, but you also know that your team that was 41-41 and trying to move and take that next step, what would you do in that scenario? Would you keep that number 3 pick and take the best player available? And also, now that we know that Sarr, there's been a report that he doesn't want to actually play for Atlanta Hawks, that he want to stick at the power forward position, and they're possibly trying to move him to center. He hasn't even worked out for them, so that may actually jumble up the top players that are taken early, and there may be a player like Zaccharie, Risacher that may be available at number 3, or maybe even Sarr if Washington doesn't take him. So if you're Rafael Stone, what would you do in this scenario?
So we've been going back and forth with this. Like I've had some discussions with people. I've seen some chats where different opinions have been thrown around, and you're kind of playing with house money at this point because you were not expected to draft at the 3 slot, first and foremost. So at this point, it's like, I think Rafael Stone owes it to the fans, to the organization as a whole, to do it his best. And so, like, that's one thing that Daryl Morey always talked about, right? And so whether you loved or hated Daryl Morey, he pretty much, like, you could kind of see the logic in a lot of the things that he did, a lot of the process of how and how he did it. Maybe you might not have agreed with it. He gained that reputation that he was not a player's GM or whatever, and he was doing things and treating guys like assets or whatever. But like having the 3rd pick in the draft, in a draft where there's so much uncertainty, you have to do your due diligence. And I love the fact that it seems like they've been doing that. They've been bringing guys in, such as Alex Sarr, who at one point in time was projected to go number 1 and probably wasn't, necessarily going to be there at 3. The fact that they brought that guy in and tried to identify whether he's somebody that they wanted, that means a lot to me as a fan, because I'm like, just looking back at previous drafts where I kind of have questions like, did we do everything we felt like we could have done to move up and get like Paulo or get Chet and one of those other drafts? Because like, to me, like if you have an opportunity to package the 3rd pick, which ironically have again, if you have an opportunity to package that pick and then maybe something else and actually, target and get the guy that you want, I mean, you have to do that. So it's like, to me, and Sarr looks very raw to me as far as on the offensive side. His defensive ability is very intriguing. Maybe next to a guy like Sengun. If that's a guy like you feel can help your team get to another level, I feel like, as long as it's within reason and to move up a spot or 2 to get that guy, I feel like that's something that you need to explore. You need to exhaust every possibility that you can actually pull that off. Because like in retrospect, I love Jabari Smith Jr. He has a lot of talent. He's 6'11". He's projected to be a good shooter and a good defender. But like in retrospect, if you could have moved up and gotten Chet or gotten Paulo, you're a better team right now. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
It's no disrespect to Jabari. It's just like at this stage in their careers, those two guys just so happen to be better. And Jabari's putting in work, so I'm not trying to discredit like him or anything like that. Like, who knows what the future holds? He's still very young. A few years from now, who knows? Maybe he is on par with those two guys. But to me, like if there's a guy out there that's above where you're slotted in the draft, and you can get that guy for a reasonable price, take advantage of that. And then, on the flip side, like you said, like if there are teams trying to trade up, and you have identified that, I have Reed Sheppard, I have Stephen Castle, I have Donovan Clingan, or whoever, Bazelis, I have these guys kind of in the same area, and you can move back and pick up an asset. Why not do that, right? Because then, at the end of the day, you are making the Rockets a better team. So, like, I'm very interested to see, like, this is a very unique draft for us, a very unique situation. I feel like we have guys in a lot of positions. We still need certain things on the team, and there are guys in this draft. They say this is not a draft where there's going to be a lot of star players coming out, but there are guys that like have specific skill sets that this team needs. So I'm very curious, and I'm very interested to see how Raphael Stone approaches this.
So let me kind of throw out a couple of scenarios, kind of just some of the rumors that's been floating around. So if you were to be offered, if Memphis is one of the teams that's trying to move up from their number 9 spot to the number 3 spot, let's say they offer you Marcus Smart and the number 9 pick, and they want the number 3 pick. If you're the Rockets, would you do that trade? Because for me, we know Marcus Smart's history with MA, and I've heard that Raphael really loves Marcus Smart's game. If you're the Rockets and let's say Reed Sheppard's there at number 3, would you rather go Reed Sheppard number 3, or would you rather trade back and possibly even get another number 1 pick, maybe 2026 pick or whatever it is? Would you trade back and do that? Of course, to make the salaries match, you would have to probably trade away a guy like a Jock Londale and Jeff Green, because they both have contracts around $8 or $9 million a year, or even a Jay Sean Tate may have to be thrown in there. So you have to trade away some of your players, but not necessarily your core players. Would a deal like that would that make you want to make that trade, or would you just want to stick and trade and drive a player like a Reed Sheppard?
To me, that goes back to what I was kind of alluding to earlier. How do you rank, and how do you, like, as far as your evaluation process, how good is Reed Sheppard to you? How good is a Alex Sarr to you? How good is a Donovan Clingan to you? How good is a Bazelis to you, or Risacher if he falls to that slot? Like, how good are those guys? Do you feel like those guys are better than, in 2 years than what you could get from like a Marcus Smart and picking up an additional asset? Surface level, because we don't know. And I haven't, obviously you and I haven't been we haven't been in any of these workouts. So like, It's kind of like, we're kind of like grasping straws right now. But surface level to me, like picking up a guy like Marcus Smart, who is a all NBA defender, who is somebody that Ime, loves and covets and slots right in. I think Marcus Smart instantly makes you a better basketball team, right? And then, like, you can pick up the 9th pick in this draft, where you can also get a guy who is probably on your board. There's a lot of guys who I think I would covet around that area, because that's where we thought we'd be drafting anyways, right? Before we moved up to number 3. So there'll still be a guy there, whether it's a Connect or it's a Ware, or there's going to be a guy there around there's going to be a guy at 9 who you can bring in as a developmental piece, and hopefully down the road that guy can actually be part of your core group. So if I can get Marcus Smart and, pick up the 9th pick, I would do it. I've talked to people who wouldn't do it because they're really high on Reed Sheppard, for example. I'm just throwing Reed Sheppard out there because he's a guy that's been linked to us a lot. And he's a guy who, by all intents and purposes, if you just want to go by analytics, and you want to go by like historical data, like his shooting this year at Kentucky is like historical. There has not been very many guys come into the NBA that have the shooting splits that he has. So if you believe that that's real and that's going to translate to the NBA, and he did actually shoot NBA threes very well, and this is a team that is, in need of shooting. And if you think that
Yes.
maybe he can project to be a, better version of Fran VanVleet, like you take that, right? So like, but me not knowing right now, then yeah, maybe I'll take Marcus Smart in number 9. What about you? What do you think?
So my only issue with a Reed Sheppard is what exactly is he an in between type player? Is he a tweener? Is he gonna be a sort of backup point guard, occasionally shooting guard? Is he not fast enough to be a point guard? Is he not athletic enough to be a shooting guard? I mean, where does he kind of fit? Because they say 6'3", but I've heard people say that he's not even 6'3". And we all know that small guards in the NBA, you if you're going to be really good, you have to be, I mean, historically good to be that size and to be able to excel in the NBA. We've seen it with Fred VanVleet, but Fred VanVleet's never been a superstar level type player. He's been a really good player, all-star, championship type player. But that's because he does a lot of different things well. He doesn't just do one particular thing. And with Reed Sheppard, yes, he's a great shooter, but also with this roster, yeah, you always find room for shooters, but if they're, for instance, not good on defense, is Ime even going to play them? Where is he going to play at? People were saying Aaron Holiday minutes, but the only reason Aaron Holiday had minutes was because of injuries. So now let's say you have all your players and they're ready to go. Where does Reed Sheppard fit in with minutes when it comes to minutes? Because you got to find minutes for Cam. You got to find minutes for Amen. You got to find minutes for Tari Eason. Um, all these guys are going to be playing next year, and probably Amen and Cam are going to be playing even more minutes compared to where they were last year when everybody was healthy. So that's another thing you got to factor in. Does Ime really want to try to insert another 19, 20-year-old player into the rotation? It's one thing if they're just going to send them to the G League. That's like Rafael had mentioned during his last press conference, where we don't have a problem necessarily them not playing right away. But if you're drafting the number 3, do you really want to draft a guy at number 3 that you're going to be like, they're not going to play at the beginning of the year at all? They're going to be on the bench. Because even with Amen wasn't going to be on the bench, but he dealt with injuries and things like that. He was going to be playing. But if you draft a guy at number 3 this year, more than likely they're not even going to be playing right away unless you're going to maybe making a lot of trades. And if you're making those trades, you're probably making trades for better players. So again, that number 3 pick's probably still not even going to be playing a lot of minutes. So for me, I would trade back. I love Marcus Smart game,
Yeah,
and especially if he's willing
I
to
think
come
he's a
off
good
the
fit here, right? Like if you put
yeah,
Marcus
he's
Smart
perfect,
on
absolutely
this
perfect
team,
fit. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, and especially if he's willing to come off the bench, because we know Fred VanVleet is still going to be your starter. We know Jalen Green is still going to be your starter. Um, Small forward, if Dylan Brooks is still here, he's still going to be your starter. So if he's willing to come off the bench and play 20, 25 minutes off the bench, that is an absolute perfect a backup point guard for the Houston Rockets. And actually, he's a decent. I mean, he's not a great 3-point shooter, but it's not like it's an Amen type of 3-point shooter where people are not even guarding him from outside. So he would be the perfect fit. And then you can still get that number 9 pick. And I'm a lot more willing to let that number 9 pick go to the G League than I am a number 3 overall pick. So, like you say, if you can still have that number 9 pick and then also get another future first round pick, if they're that desperate to move up, to me, it's a no-brainer. Unless you can go out there and find a superstar that you can package that number 3 pick with your other picks. But I seriously doubt that's going to happen. So for me, with this particular draft, and again, you don't know with any draft if the players are going to be good or not. You really don't know that until, hey, we're still trying to figure that out from 2 or 3 drafts ago for some of the players on the Houston Rockets. So, but for me, you know what Marcus Smart can bring you. You know you're trying to take that next step. And to take that next step, you need guys like Marcus Smart, who still can be a great defender, is a decent enough shooter, is a decent enough playmaker, and brings that toughness that we know Ime loves.
yeah. Like that's one thing I was waiting on you to finish up because like he brings a hard nosed competitiveness to
Yeah.
the team. Like, and I'm not saying we don't have it. Like we got guys like Tari Eason on the team. I think Amen has a quiet competitiveness to him,
Yeah.
and he's very tough as well. I think Cam is probably going to bring that too. Like once he gets more
Mhm.
established in the league, there are guys on the team who have it. Fred VanVleet, obviously, to be like a 5'10", 5'11" dude in the NBA, playing
Yeah,
at the level that he does, he has it as well. But you bring in Marcus Smart, who, like I said, he's been an All NBA defender. He's been to an NBA Finals. They didn't win. They lost to the Warriors, but like he's been there. He's been on successful teams. He's been in rotation or starting on these teams as well. So like I don't know, I don't know how you can't love that unless you just really fall in love with that player at that pick number 3. I think that's, like you said, it's kind of a no-brainer to kind of move back if you can get Marcus Smart and get the 9th pick, where you can probably get like I want to say like a similar prospect, maybe not like an equivalent prospect. But like I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those drafts like the Giannis Antetokounmpo
Giannis.
draft, where
Yep. Yeah.
like a guy who is not drafted in the top 5 is going to be the best player in this draft
Yeah.
because like
Kawhi
there's so
Leonard
much
type draft.
uncertainty.
Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be a guy who like we're going to look back and be like, how did he fall to 10? How did he fall to 12? And so, like, the Rockets have a unique opportunity. Maybe you add a rotation guy right now and you can take a swing, on one of those, guys who are more like a high ceiling guys. And you can
Like a
stab,
like a
like you said,
Ron like a Ronald Holland type
Ron
player. Like
Holland.
if he
Ron
fall,
Holland is
yeah,
a guy who, like, I wouldn't take at 3, but I would certainly take at 9. He's a
yeah,
guy who, like,
absolutely,
I think could be better than Reed Sheppard. He's not better than Reed Sheppard right now, so I
yeah.
couldn't justify taking I couldn't justify taking Ron Holland necessarily right now at number 3. But at number 9, man, you take him, and then 3 years from now, he could potentially be the best player in this draft. I'm not saying he will be, but that's the kind of draft this is. You just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like I said, let me ask you this question: what player would need to be available for you to stay at number 3? That is pretty much like, okay, there's no way I'm trading this pick. I'm staying at number 3. Is there any player in this draft that's kind of like a no brainer that if they're available at number 3, you're taking them?
Okay, so I want to say I do believe in Reed Sheppard because I do believe in the shooting. I looked at
Mhm.
like some people who I like trust, from the analytics. I've told you a long time ago. Like I look at analytics, I look at the data, I look at all that stuff, but I'm also like an eye test guy. Like
Yeah.
so like but like I've seen his shooting splits. Like they're real. Like he shoots every 3-pointer like extremely well and at a high rate. Even the and some guys fool you because they're taking college threes. There's even a statistic out there that you can look up where he's taking NBA threes, and those are still at a very high level. So I kind of Reed would be a guy who like I do have my doubts about, but like I think I would probably move back for Marcus Smart in a number 9. Um, One guy who I don't have a lot of intel on, who I kind of wonder about, is Alex Sarr. So he's a
Yeah.
guy who, if you're going to go with Alperen Sengun as your franchise player, as your center of the future, you need a guy like Alex Sarr next to him. Like, so to me, depending on, do you think he can develop offensively? Um, he's a guy. He's the type of player like, because I really want, like, a lot of people are talking about Paulo, in that Jabari draft. I kind of wanted Chet. I kind of wanted Chet a little bit because I felt like he'd be able to cover up some of Shingun's defensive deficiencies, if you want to say. He'd be able to like be that weak side shot blocker, kind of a roamer or whatever. Alex Sarr might be able to be that guy. So like to me, if they value Alex Sarr, if he's a guy that they really think can be a missing piece on this team, I think you stay at that. You stay at number 3 if you believe in Alex Sarr. Uh, Ironically, you wrote an article about what's his name, Bazulis.
Marcus
You got some
Basillas.
you got some flack on that, but like
Little
you
bit,
you
yeah.
spelled out your reasons of why you thought he'd be a good home run
Yeah.
swing for the number 3 pick. And if the
Yeah.
Rockets have evaluated that guy as like the way what you were saying about him, like if there's a guy at number 3 that you can stay there and you feel like this guy can be like a integral piece in the future, you stay there. If not, take one of those trades.
Yeah, and my whole thinking with Basillas was, I me personally, I want them to trade the pick. It's not, like, oh, they got to take Basillas no matter what. It was like if they're gonna stick at number 3, And if it stays Risacher, or vice versa, 1-2, now I'm starting to look at upside. I'm starting to look at versatility. I'm starting to look at, okay, what can they bring that the Rockets need? Reshaper definitely brings the shooting, but does he help improve their defense? Does he help improve their playmaking? For me, it's just with Vassell, he's an overall all around type of player. He doesn't do anything one thing particularly great, but he also is a better playmaker than Reed Sheppard. He has the potential to be a better defender than Reed
Defender.
Sheppard. He can play above the rim. He's really good off ball. His shooting, like I said, that took a dip last season because of a couple of factors. He started off the year with an ankle injury, and the G League Ignite was a complete mess. And we see now that they've pretty much been disbanded, and a lot of reason why, because of their player development or lack of player development. So I took all that into consideration, and also going into last season, he was the number one prospect. Everybody saw him as the number one player in the league, and he actually had an interview now, which I guess the way you put it is kind of funny the way he put it. But he said that if I was shot better last year, I would have been the number one guy, no matter what. Which, of course, that's like saying if I would have played better throughout my career, I would have been a Hall of Famer. I mean, that's kind of hard to say and not laugh, but I can see what his point is. He's just basically saying that yes, I struggled from shooting last year, but when I was in high school, I was a much better shooter, and he thinks that he can become that shooter again. So to me, it was just kind of looking at more potential. If you're going to stay at that number 3 pick in a draft that you weren't expecting to have a number 3 pick, why not try to go for the home run instead of going for a single or a double? Which to me, that's kind of what Reed Sheppard is.
What do you think about Donovan? We'd be like remiss to not talk about Donovan Clingan. Like, what do you think about
Yeah,
him? He's a hot prospect as far as like teams supposedly are targeting him to trade up, and then like
yeah,
even we've heard some buzz that Atlanta might even consider him at number one. Um,
yeah.
I don't know. Like as far as like just from a Rockets perspective, do you think he makes sense here at number three?
So I even saw what another thing Kelly Eco mentioned was that he was shooting up the Rockets draft boards. To me, that's kind of just smokescreen because they know a lot of teams want him. And hey, what's the best way to get teams behind you interested in him and say, hey, we possibly could draft him? Because it really doesn't make much sense for the Rockets. If you plan on keeping Alperen Sengun, if you plan on people kind of forget Steven Adams will be playing next season.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have Steven Adams, and you still have Jock Landale on the contract. To me, that's a pretty good third center to have if he's going to be your number 3 center. So center is actually your deepest position on the entire team. So for the Rockets, it doesn't really make much sense to go after Donovan Clingan. To me, he kind of reminds me of a Walker Kessler type of player who could be a really good role player off the bench. But again, are you going to draft him at number 3 for him to possibly fight for the number 2 spot with Steven Adams? And do we really think if Steven Adams is healthy, he's going to be a better player next season than Steven Adams? I don't see it. I think for me, the Rockets are kind of just dangling it out there to try to get more interest from teams like Memphis, who definitely want to bring in a center and move Jarrett Jackson Jr. back to his power forward, or even a team like Charlotte or Portland, any of these teams that and it's kind of funny with Portland because they made a big deal about trading for Ayton. Now they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
also saying that they want Clingan. So it's just a lot of things kind of floating around. It's kind of hard to know what's true and what's not. But for me, it doesn't really make much sense for in a Rockets perspective because, like I said, center is actually a really deep position on a team that kind of lacking in depth in other areas on the court. But I mean, for you, what do you think of the whole, that he's shooting up the Rockets draft board, and what do you just kind of think of Clingan overall?
I personally think that I don't know. Ime was big on bringing Brick Lopez in, so I don't necessarily like dismiss it, right? Because the reason he wanted to bring Brick Lopez in is because he felt like Brick could anchor the defense that he wanted to run. I kind of feel like Klingon might be a similar defender, so I haven't written it off completely. However, I think if you bring Klingon in, I kind of feel like I hate to say it, but and then I don't want the backlash that's gonna come with this. But like to me, if you draft Klingon
I
at
know where
the
this is
third
going.
overall pick in the draft, that is
Yeah,
signaling to me that you are willing to move off of Alperen Sengun, who is your best player right now.
yeah,
Alperen Sengun is like unquestionably like the best player on the team right now. Like I don't think that at this point most people are going to argue with you about that. Um, I think bringing in a Donovan Clingan at number 3 is kind of signaling that you are interested in like I don't know, maybe taking a different path, to your roster construction. And I mean, there is a path where you can go where you can build around Shingun. There's a path where you can go to build around a Donovan Clingan, and they're just very different. So, and they have the same agent. Like I know that's been brought up a lot too. Like they share an agent. As an agent, you probably would not want both of those two guys in the same situation. So I don't know. Like that would be like a very interesting pick. I would question that pick. I do like Donovan Clingan. I've been watching a lot of like video on him the past few days just to kind of see like I'm like, what is the hype about? Because like to me, when I watched him, just like on first glance, he didn't. I wasn't like, oh, this is a guy that could go number 1 in the draft. That's not something that's not something that I ever like really considered. But then like the rumors start swirling around that Atlanta might take him at number 1. So I was like, let me go back and look, like let me see what the entry is on this guy. But I just think for the Rockets, like you said, like you still have you have Alperen Sengun, you have Steven Adams, you have Jock Landale who came on towards the end of the year, and I think we ragged on him a lot at the beginning of the year. He had an ankle injury, a severe ankle injury that clearly inhibited his play, and he played a lot better towards season end. So like that is one of your deepest positions. So for you to bring a fourth center into the mix, I don't know. It kind of signals to me like there's going to be like a shift of some sort. So like I don't know. I personally don't think I would draft him 3rd, unless you're planning on moving Shingun. Another guy who I think is kind of interesting that keeps coming up a lot, who I think a lot of Rockets fans don't want at 3 is Stephen Castle. He's another guy who like I keep hearing like maybe he could be a Drew Holiday type of guy, or like even you said like earlier like a Marcus Smart type of guy. So I don't know. There's just so many different this draft on Wednesday. I think is going to tell us a lot about the direction we're going in. This is the probably most like confusion that I've ever had kind of going into a draft over the past, like since we've been drafting in the lottery, these past 4 years, like this is probably the most one where I'm just like, I have no idea what we're going to do.
And it's funny. This is actually probably the draft where they have the most power, because in the past, the Rockets had to draft where they were drafting because they have to bring in talent. They didn't have talent. They had to bring some talent in. But this season, it's almost playing like with house money, because I guarantee the front office going into that draft lottery results, they were thinking, okay, we'd be around 9, 10. We may draft somebody, but more than likely we're going to trade that pick. Now you jump up into the top 3 and you already have the core 6 that we talk about all the time. You don't have to bring in another young guy. You're not at that point anymore. You're at the point now where you're trying to take that next step, but you got a bunch of teams behind you that were a lot worse than you were last year. I mean, think about it. Several teams behind you had a lot worse record than you have, and you have a higher draft pick. That puts you in a really good position. And we've seen it now with all these teams trying to aggressively move up to where the Rockets are, because what they're trying to do, they're trying to move in front of San Antonio as well, because San Antonio has a 4th and 8th pick. And they know there's certain players that San Antonio is absolutely going to draft. Zaccharie, Risacher being one of them, possibly even Donovan Clingan, because we've heard for a while that Victor Wembanyama doesn't necessarily always want to play the center position. So there's teams that know this, and that's why I'm sure Raphael Stone just sitting back there like, man, this is a great position to be at, because I'm not the one having to make the calls this time around. His team's calling me left and right, trying to get a pick that we didn't even think we would have at the beginning of the season. So if you look at it that way, to me, this is probably the most power the Rockets have had in any draft. They can kind of shape the entire draft on what they do, because you trade away that number 3 pick, and now you got other teams that are going to have to adjust their draft board. So this is kind of the Rockets are kind of controlling a lot of what's going on with the draft.
That's why I'm not really in love with like locking in at 3. I'll be perfectly okay if they trade, because they're like we've said over and over and over and over, there's so much uncertainty in this draft. There's guys I like. There's things I like about all of these top prospects, but they all are like flawed.
Yes.
Like every single player that you can bring up has a flaw, and they're all very young. They're like most of them are like 19 years old. Like if you look at, I was looking at it the other day, and I'm like, this guy's 19 6 months. This guy's 19 8 months. This guy's 19. You know what I mean? So we don't know. We have no idea what they're going to be. So like that's where the scouting comes in. I think the Rockets spent a lot of money bringing in like guys who they really trust, who bringing guys in the room who they feel like have good knowledge on being able to like scout guys and figure out, kind of trying to project what they're going to be. But we have no. It's crazy. So like, yeah, I'm not necessarily like locked in at 3. And like maybe I'm in the minority. I don't know, but like adding Marcus Smart to the team that we had last year, I just think makes us a better team. So if Memphis wants to move up and get Clingan or whoever, and they're going to give us Marcus Smart in the 9th pick, I would probably take that. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah. And a couple more. Well, one more thing I really want to get into, because we're going to make this show a little bit shorter, because really the big news is next week on whatever happens, whether it's a trade. Something big is going to happen next week. Either the Rockets are going to make a trade, or they're going to be drafting at number 3 pick. And we're going to have the people going back and forth on whether that's a horrible pick or not. That's just kind of, it's inevitable that's going to happen. So one way or another, we're going to have some big news next week, and we're definitely going to be having a show maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Because, of course, this year, one other quick thing, the draft is actually 2 separate days. So
Right.
you have the first round Wednesday, you have the second round Thursday. Now, of course, the second round is not nearly as big of a deal, but the Rockets still may be making moves to try to get in, because if I'm not mistaken, the Rockets do have a second round pick this year, if I'm not mistaken. So there will still be some news as far as that is concerned. But one thing I want to get into before we wrap up the show is, I want to ask you this question. It hasn't been talked about as much because the draft is coming up now, but we heard some rumblings about a longer term contract or contract extensions for Jalen Green and alperensengun. So I want to ask your opinion, because we know that after this season, both Alperen and Jalen, the Rockets can still sign them that next season as restricted free agents. But once you get to that point, you're starting to play a dangerous game of, hey, we may lose them for nothing if we don't come to some kind of contract agreement. So if you're the GM again, are you offering any one of these guys a contract extension, and are you offering either one of these guys the max? I think I kind of know the answer to that one, but I'm still going to ask you anyway.
If I draft Donovan Clingan, I'm not. I
Yeah.
kind of feel like if you draft Donovan Clingan, you are signaling to me that you like Şengün, but you still have some questions about his defense. If you drafted him at 3, right? I think Şengün has earned, like an extension. I feel like if anybody's earned an extension on the team, it's him. But to me, like I feel like if they draft Donovan Clingan with the 3rd pick on Wednesday, then to me, I don't see it. I think maybe, unfortunately, he might be a guy who's being dangled out there. You know what I mean? But I do think like if you can put like a guy like Alex Sarr next to Alperen Şengün, I think it mitigates some of the concerns that you have with him defensively, because Alex Sarr's defense is like, a lot of people were like talking about how like Evan Mobley is like this generational defender, and he's a guy that we kind of missed on or whatever. I think Alex Sarr brings you some similar level defense to like what you would have gotten with Mobley, and he pairs well with Şengün, and he's a guy who also, even though he's 7 foot tall, 7'1", whatever he is, he does not want to play center. So I think that's a good fit. That's a good, like, if you're talking about just like from a roster construction standpoint. And then when we get to Jalen Green, like I've always, you can go back and look a year podcast. I've been a Jalen Green supporter from day one. I still believe in Jalen Green, but like he's on the clock, and I've said, like, I admit it, he's on the clock. I don't think you can offer him a max contract right now. Like, I don't think he's earned it. And do I think that he has the potential to be like a all-star level player? Yes. Do I think that he's earned a max contract? No. So to me, like neither. It just kind of depends. Like I think if you've committed to Shingun, and then also I think like if you're looking at like building a roster and roster construction, it may not be in your best interest, right? Like if you're going to give Shingun the max anyway, like why do it now?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you can still bring in, because I think his cap slot is lower than Jalen because he went like at a different spot in the draft. So
Yeah. Because Jalen's making 12 million a year. Shangun's still only making 5 million a year next season. So he's still, regardless, his max is going to be less than Jalen's. But I kind of see it the same way. If they're going to give anybody a max, it will be Shangun. Are they more likely to try to extend him with a lower cap slot? I think that's a possibility. It's a question of will Shangun take it. If you're Shangun, you're probably like, heck no, I'm not taking anything less than
mhm.
a max because I figure I'm going to get better and some team's going to give me that max. So that's when it becomes kind of you're playing a dangerous game because after this season, like I said, restricted free agent, you can match anything somebody offers them. But again, do you want to go down that route and possibly lose them for nothing? If let's say they tell you they don't want to come back, yes, you can match it. But if you're that player and you tell them, hey, I don't want to come back, we know in today's NBA, they hold a lot more power and they could tell him, I'm not going to play for your team anymore, then you have to end up trading him or you just have to end up letting him walk and then you don't get anything for him at all. So this first few months is so important, especially more important for Jalen Green than Alperen Sengun because we've seen Alperen Sengun play at an all-star level before he got hurt. We haven't seen Jalen Green play at an all-star level for more than a month at a time. We
Mhm.
saw it in March. We didn't see it for most of last season or seasons before that. So if Jalen Green goes out there, if he gives you Jalen Green March in October, November, December, then the questions of whether you give him a max, then those questions start to heat up fast because that's when you're starting to see a player that can take it to the next level. But if we
Right.
see Jalen Green come out there and he's playing like Jalen Green has to begin most seasons, then the questions are going to be more like, are you going to trade him by the deadline? Then are you going to give him a max?
Yeah, because March Jalen Green looked like a top 10, 15 player in the
Yeah,
NBA. Like his and that's the thing where you just don't know him. His ceiling is so high, his
yeah,
floor is so low. He's
yeah.
like there's
We've
such
seen
a
both. Yeah,
the vast gap between like what he can be and what he might end up being, and we just don't know because he's been so inconsistent. Um,
yeah,
I'm just hoping, for the sake of the franchise, just as a Rockets fan, not even a Jalen Green fan, but just from a Rockets fan perspective. If you really love the Rockets, if you're really a Rockets fan out there, like you should be hoping Jalen Green like reaches his potential and becomes like what they hoped he would be when they drafted him second overall, behind Cade and in
yeah,
between, Evan Mobley. Because we saw that guy in March. That was the guy that I think they thought they were getting, and we've only seen flashes of it, but the flashes are there, and his flashes are so high. And
yeah,
he was not just doing it on one side of the floor. He actually was playing decent defense, and the team was winning. And so I don't know. It's just one of those things where, like, to me now, I kind of wonder if it's a mental thing with him, and if it's a mental thing
yeah,
with him, that concerns me more than anything else. Like I hope it's not just like him, like lacking focus or anything like that. Because like you saw what he could actually do in March, and it was like the only reason he did not win not rookie. The only reason he didn't win player of the month is because there's this guy out there named Luka Doncic.
yeah, yeah.
who I don't know if you know, but he pretty much like,
He's pretty
backpacked and
good.
carried his team to the NBA finals this year before he went up
Yeah.
against Boston, and that guy's pretty spectacular. And like for a whole month, the only player that was better than Jalen Green was Luka Doncic.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So before we wrap up the show, real quickly, since we're probably not going to do another show until after the draft. So if you had to put money on it, what do you think the Rockets going to do?
You put me on the spot. We didn't talk about. Okay, I think we trade the pick. I think we trade. Like if
Okay.
I had to, if you said I had $100, you giving me $100, and I have to put it down on will we pick at 3 or trade at 3. I think we're gonna trade. I don't know if it's up or down. Don't make me
Yeah.
pick up or down because I don't know.
Yeah. I'll put it
But
like this. I would be shocked if they don't trade the pick. I would be shocked. I
I just
normally
think
don't
they
say
have
it
so
like
many.
that.
They have so many people who
Yes,
want this pick. I
yes,
I feel like, you know what I mean. Like, just imagine, like, you keep getting these phone calls. Like, eventually somebody gonna tell you something you like, right? Like, somebody
yeah,
gonna put, like, because not only are you getting all, but and that's the thing, you're getting a lot of calls, so they're bidding against one another, and so that drives up the price. And so you're
yeah,
at a unique position where you have a coveted pick. And we haven't had that in a while, where like people are like, because in previous drafts, like there's been like a top three.
yeah,
There was Cade, Jalen, and Evan Mobley. We didn't know what order they were going to go in, but those were the three picks.
yeah.
There was Paulo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith Jr.
Jabari.
Those were the three
Yeah,
picks. We didn't know necessarily what order they were going to go in. This draft is different. This draft, and then last year there was, um, who was it?
Scoot,
Wemby. We knew Wemby
Man,
was
and
going
Wimby.
one.
Yeah,
And then it was like a matter of whether or not Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller would go 2 or 3, and we
yeah,
had the fourth pick. So there was not a whole lot of like confusion at the top of the
yeah,
draft, as far as top three. In this draft, you have no idea. You have no idea, and I feel like with all the teams trying to position to move up, I think eventually Raphael Stone might hear something that he likes, and
yeah.
so yeah, I think we'll trade. Like, if I had to bet money, I think we trade.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, I'll be shocked if they keep that pick. Out of all years, this is the perfect opportunity to take that next step and trade that pick and improve your team right away. So, like I said, we probably won't have another show into the draft. We will definitely have a show or two next week after the draft, depending on the timing, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. We'll definitely let you know ahead of time on that. As usual, we always appreciate support. As usual, Vader, I appreciate you jumping on and
Appreciate
joining
you,
me for the
man.
show.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
always a good time, man. Look forward to doing another show after we make the pick or make the trade or whatever we end up
Yeah.
doing with it, so we can break that down.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. And as usual, we appreciate everybody's support. Let us know down in the comments. What do you think? Would you trade that pick or would you keep it? And if you keep it, who would you go with that number 3 overall pick? Like I said, we appreciate the support. We appreciate the likes. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And as usual, make sure you check out the next episode of the Rocket Fuel Podcast.